I told you guys in part 1 I had even more movies to add to this list. What films should be fresh on Rotten Tomatoes? Let's talk about it. What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. So, in my previous video, I talked about 10 movies that are rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, but I personally believe they should have a fresh score. Went through some of the comments, got some awesome suggestions from you all, and I had more movies to add regardless. So today we're going to talk about 10 more movies that should, I believe, be fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Again, it's just a personal list, and I'm going to throw in even more personal bias in this video. You may not agree as much, but this is still such a fun topic to talk about, and some of these movies, I truly couldn't believe they were rotten. Now, one more time, what does being rotten on Rotten Tomatoes mean? It doesn't necessarily mean that the average score is bad. It just means how many critics gave it below a 6 out of 10, a 3 out of 5. That constitutes a bad score. Now, some of these films are very close to that 60%, but if they're rotten, they can absolutely make this list. And of course, I need your comments down below. Would you like to see the opposite from me? Some films that maybe I believe should be rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. That's divisive, but this one's a bit more happy. Let's get into it. I do want to throw in 3 honorable mentions really quick. These are very personal choices, and not everyone's going to agree. I have Hot Rod, a movie that I think is hilarious. The Beach Bum, and I get it. I'm one of the only people that like this movie, but I think it should be fresh. And Under the Silver Lake. Crazy, divisive, but I believe one of Andrew Garfield's best performances, and a really good A24 film. Honorable mentions out of the way, let's get into the first film on this list. Hey, look, it's Top Gun. Can you believe Top Gun is not fresh on Rotten Tomatoes? I couldn't believe it. I saw this score just knowing that this is one of those movies that so many people hold in high regard, and it warranted a sequel that we're getting, and it did fairly well and built up Tom Cruise. I mean, it wasn't maybe the movie, but it was one of the movies that built him up. It's so of its time. And maybe that's part of the problem for some, but Top Gun is held so high by so many people. You look at that audience score, and 83%. Now, Austin, audience scores can sometimes be manipulated. Yes, I know this. It's very easy to go on Rotten Tomatoes and review something if you haven't seen a movie, if you are just a normal user. So I don't always agree with the audience score, but you can normally tell when something is manipulated, when there's a bunch of reviews that go on at once and they're trying to review bomb a film, which I think they're trying to combat now, which is good. We've seen a lot of that over the last couple of years, but this is not one of those movies, right? I think truly 83% of the audience loves this movie, and I truly agree with that score much more than the 54. Now, I may not be as high as a lot of people who hold this up as a classic, but I think Top Gun is a really good movie, especially for its time, and so many grew up with it and have nostalgia for it. But it's Cruise, it's Kilmer, it is maybe one of the movies of the 80s, and I cannot believe it's a 54%. Let's look at the average score super quick, a 5.8 out of 10. So yeah, still not a good average score. That's shocking to me. Now again, with a lot of these older movies, you see how many reviews there are. 50-something with Top Gun, 47 for Billy Madison. And with the newer films, you have around 200 to 300 reviews. So a lot more there to get more of an opinion of. But still, out of the 47 critics, I can't believe 40% of them are the only ones who like this movie. Let's look at the average score super quick before we talk about it, a 4.7. Yeah, still not good. I am a huge fan of Adam Sandler from this time period, the late 80s, all through the 90s. I thought most of his comedy worked well, and I'm a huge fan of movies like Wedding Singer and Happy Gilmore. We talked about last week, and I wanted to bring up another Adam Sandler movie, Austin. He's just not all that funny anymore. I get it. His last few comedies haven't really worked. But Billy Madison, stop looking at me, swine, is a movie that really resonates. It's very quotable. Sure, it is over the top, and it's one that I understand why it's not the highest on Rotten Tomatoes. But for me, as a huge fan of this, I think Billy Madison should be higher. I still think he's a really good actor, Uncut Gems, but this was Adam Sandler in his prime. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. And I don't know why you gave Taken a bad score. It's a 58. It's very close. And you see 174 reviews, and understandably why it is maybe a bit lower than the audience score, because maybe the script isn't the best, and it isn't an action movie that compares to something like maybe a John Wick or some of the Mission Impossible movies. But I still think it's a really good movie, and I get why it resonated so well with audience members, especially the year it came out. Taken, I feel like, is a really good action movie that put Liam Neeson on the action pedestal that maybe he's still at today. We've had a lot of films from him since then. And the Taken sequels, which aren't that good. But this movie was so good, it spawned a franchise. Now, again, it did get close, and the average score, it's still a 5.75. Not great. I think this movie should be fresh because I think it did a lot. It's very quotable, sticks with you, and it's a sad, emotional, and real story. And that's what resonates with me, and that's why I'm a big fan of Taken. Again, just the first one. Okay, this is probably more of a personal movie. Maybe not everyone has seen The Book of Eli, but I'm a big fan of The Book of Eli. And the audience score not as high, 64% here. I do see why it is a bit more divisive, but I feel like 47 is too low. I feel as if it should at least be a 60. This is a stylistic, post-apocalyptic film with a B.A. performance from Denzel Washington. I mean, we're always talking about John Wick. We're talking about Ethan Hunt. His character in this movie, man, he does a lot of damage. And we see him in The Equalizer be just as B.A. as he is here, but this is where we first saw Denzel Washington do what he's doing as an action star. Gary Oldman's really good in this film. Now, what we're dealing with here, the actual book, I won't spoil what it is, maybe that's part of why, and they see that, they're just like, we've seen this before, it's cliche, it's predictable, yada, 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 but I think it's the way it's handled, and I think the action scenes here, and just the visual style to the movie, all of it works for me, and I'm probably more of a fan than others are, but I think 47% is too low. I think a 5.4 out of 10 is too low. I would definitely go fresh. Did I say nostalgia? Did y'all say nostalgia? Come on now, it's Space Jam. I get it. If you didn't grow up with this, you probably don't love it as much as me. And if you're not a sports person, maybe it's just like, it's just Michael Jordan with a bunch of Looney Tunes. I think this movie's more than that. It was definitely created to build up Michael Jordan and to build up the Looney Tunes and for a purpose. But I think the movie knows exactly what it is. And it's cool to see a film maybe with not the best script, and maybe with some really elements to it, but it's cool to see a film just kind of embrace that. So I think Space Jam does a really good job. It warrants a sequel. It has a huge fan base. That audience score maybe is a bit too low. I expected higher, but again, if you didn't grow up with it, if you don't have that nostalgia, those of us who do, I feel as if we want it to be higher than a 43% on Rotten Tomatoes, higher than a 5.3 out of 10 average score. Space Jam is one of those movies, man. Hit me so hard as a kid. Can't wait for the sequel. And that soundtrack, oh my goodness. It is not often we are talking about a rotten movie from Steven Spielberg. But Hook, 29%, only 65 reviews, is a rotten movie on Rotten Tomatoes. It is so difficult to kind of digest that as a fan of this movie. I'm not the world's biggest fan, and I don't think it's maybe the best thing that Spielberg's ever done, but 29%, man, that is the lowest we've seen so far. Yeah, the average score is a bit higher, almost a 5, which is pretty good, but I am much more on the side of the audience here, 76%. That's the score I agree with. I am a huge fan of Hook. I think it's one of Robin Williams' most fun and energetic performances. Yeah, Robin Williams, energetic, duh. But he's so good. He captures the spirit of Peter Pan. I think Dustin Hoffman's really good. I just think the overall feel of this movie, certain elements don't hold up. But it's an interesting and different spin on Peter Pan. Enough, I believe, to warrant some more appreciation than it's getting, especially from that score. "I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence," said Nicolas Cage all the way back in 2004. National Treasure. Look, it's another one I can kind of see, right? It's a movie that, it's conventional. It's a premise we've seen 1,000 times, but we've never seen it with this cast, with this group of heroes, with this kind of almost an epic story to be told in a very Disney-fied way, which is, again, kind of... But a 46%, it's too much fun for me to be on Rotten Tomatoes. At least a 6, at least a 60%. Average score, 5.3 out of 10. Okay, a little bit higher, but still. And you're always going to have energy from Nicolas Cage. You're always going to have this kind of performance, but there's something about this franchise that I think he works so well with, and it's one of those movies that was good enough to get a sequel. I actually liked the sequel, but we're talking about the first film, 46%. It's definitely on my list as someone who grew up with this semi-over-the-top franchise, I'll say that. All right, Austin, Adam Sandler movies, Hook, Space Jam, you're just talking about nostalgia. All right, let's throw in a really genuinely good artistic film. The Life Aquatic, Wes Anderson's movie, you know, that film that a lot of critics talk about, at least we thought and hold in high regard. Yeah, it's rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. Those who I know that love this movie. And this audience score, I think, nailed it. 82%. Yeah, that's almost exactly where I would go. Now, the average rating is a bit higher for critics. It is at least a fresh there. This is one of those Wes Anderson movies, and you can say this about most of his films, but I really felt his heart and his soul. It may be even more over the top than a lot of his films. More CGI, more effects, more of a different premise. He's always doing different premises. But he keeps that artistic sensibility about him, and he brings us a fun and entertaining adventure with a great cast. Jeff Goldblum, Willem Dafoe, Bill Murray is awesome. This is one of my favorite performances from Bill Murray. Everyone is good. It is so much fun. I can't believe this is... I can, out of all the films we've talked about so far, the fact that this is below a 60, I'm just like, all right. We're going to transfer over that angry energy to a movie called Natural Born Killers. Written by Quentin Tarantino, Oliver Stone, directed by Oliver Stone, starring Woody Harrelson, Robert Downey Jr., Tommy Lee Jones. This is a satirical take on this over-the-top. It's very violent and bloody. It's kind of what we expect from those names that I just mentioned, the filmmakers. I think it's a great movie. I really do. I think Natural Born Killers is maybe Harrelson's best performance. It's maybe one of the better satires I've seen for this type of premise. The average rating, I mean, still a 5.6. Granted, only 39 reviews. So I guarantee if you get more critics on this, they're going to end up giving it a higher score. But this, in my opinion, is a great movie from that time, one that holds up and resonates, and it's just got great talent. And with that good of talent, most of the time, you're going to get a pretty good result. It's another one I can't believe it's that low. 46% audience score. Nailed it. And finally, we have Transformers, except it's the Michael Bay Transformers, which is at 58%. Very close, for sure. 227 reviews, that's a lot, so it probably is where it's going to remain, but hey, I think Transformers, at least the first one. I don't like the sequels, I'll put that out there. I think the third one is competent enough, but the majority of the films I just think are really messy. I'm much more of a fan of the Shia LaBeouf portion of the franchise as opposed to the Mark Wahlberg portion. Even though I'm a big fan of Mark Wahlberg, I still think this first movie, scaled back, not as over the top, the filmmaking style isn't as wacky and zany and just choppy as it is in the sequels, and I think this genuinely has a good, epic, entertaining story, especially for the mid-2000s, unlike anything we had ever seen before. Look at the average rating, it's right at that score. So I don't know if I agree, 85% of the audience. That just means a lot of people liked this movie, and I get that, but I still think it's good. I think it's good. There's just... there's a little bit too much of the tropiness within the script, so I can see why critics didn't like this movie, but personally, I would make this first Transformers movie fresh. I just think for what it did, and 12, 13 years old, watching this in a theater, my mind was blown, but hey, I was 2 years older when I watched the sequel, didn't like that, so at least I could constitute what a good movie was regardless. I think this first one was super fun, and it is a Michael Bay movie. Another one, because we had one on the last list, that I think should be fresh regardless. That is my list of 10, guys. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. This was a lot of fun to do. If you like this series and you'd like to see me do the opposite, where I talk about movies that should be rotten, smash that thumbs up button. And of course, I need your comments down below. What are some films that I didn't talk about? I guarantee there are so many that I left off this list. Before you guys go, if you want to check out Flick Fan Nation on Discord, we have a cool page going over there. Let's get it to 200, talking about movies, doing a Netflix party this week for everyone to join into. I appreciate you guys for watching this video, and I'll be back very soon.